Just a quick explainer today on the stave and clefs. We'll just kick things off by looking at the stave. So the stave is a group of 5 lines that allow us to notate pitch with a real degree of accuracy. It basically works like a ladder with lower pitches down at the bottom of the stave and higher pitches up at the very top. And as we move through the stave, we sort of count in lines and spaces through the 7 letters of the musical alphabet. So the letters A through G. So here I've got a stave that I've filled in with a note in every sort of possible location. And let's just say that the bottom note here is an A. If that were an A, then this would have to be a B, that would have to be a C, that would have to be a D, that would have to be an E, that would have to be an F, the next one up would be a G, that would be an A, that would be a B, that would be a C, that would be a D, that would be an E, and that would be an F. Just because that's how a stave works. We sort of count through in those lines and spaces through the 7 letters of the musical alphabet in order. But we're still missing some information. We still need to know specifically which notes are where. And for that, we need something called a clef. So I think the best way of doing this is by looking at an example of a clef. So here we've got perhaps the most common clef. We've got treble clef, otherwise known as a G clef. And what this clef does is it says that the G above middle C is on the 2nd line from the bottom. So that G there is the G above middle C. And if that's G, if that line is G, then the note above it must be A, the line above that must be B, the note in the space above that must be C, and so on and so forth. And equally, if we count down, we must know therefore that the note in that space is an F, then the note on the line below is an E, the note in the space below that is a D, and then we finally get to middle C on the sort of the little ledger line at the bottom of the stave. So that's what sort of treble clef looks like, and that's how treble clef works in conjunction with the stave to show us sort of what pitches are where. As you can imagine, treble clef is often used for relatively high music that's relatively high in pitch, given the relatively high nature of all the pitches notated here on the stave. Let's look at another example. This is bass clef. This is another very, very common clef. And what bass clef does is it says that the F below middle C is on the 2nd line from the top of the stave. So this note here is an F. And if we then start to count up from that point, we must know therefore that the note in the space above that is a G, the note in the line above that is an A, the note in the space above that is a B, and on the little ledger line right at the top of the stave we've got middle C again. And then we can count down in the same kind of way. So we get E, and then D, and then C, and then B, and then A, and so on and so forth. As you can imagine, bass clef is used for music that is relatively low in pitch, given the relatively low nature of the pitches sort of on the stave here. Right, so those are the 2 most common types of clef. You're very often going to see either treble clef or bass clef in music that you look at. But there are 2 other clefs that are not so common but do occur on a regular basis. So let's have a look at those 2 now. The first of which is alto clef. It's otherwise known as a C clef, and it's because it shows us that middle C is on the middle line of the stave. This note here is middle C, and again we can count up similarly through the stave in lines and spaces. So we've got middle C there, and then D, E, F, G, A, and B counting up, and then B, A, G, F counting down. That's alto clef. And then the other very, very similar, the other less common type of clef, which is very similar to alto clef, is tenor clef. And tenor clef is exactly the same clef. It's still, we still refer to it as a C clef, But it's slightly different in that it says that middle C is no longer now on the middle line, it's on the second line from the top. So if middle C is now on the second line from the top, you've got middle C there, and we can sort of count up again and work out where the rest of the notes are, and we count down and work out the notes at the sort of the lower end of the stave. These two clefs are less common, but they do occur kind of regularly. The alto clef you see quite a lot in string quartet music, or indeed in string parts, because it's the clef that the viola uses. And the tenor clef you might see in some trombone writing, or you might see in some sort of particularly high cello writing. Because these two clefs are, they sort of have sort of like middle ground pitches. The pitches in these two clefs are very much sort of in the centre of the piano. And that's broadly speaking where the viola plays, and that's broadly speaking where the tenor and the trombone might play in their sort of upper mid to high registers. So that's sort of the stave and the sort of the four clefs that you're going to come across on a regular basis. I've just quickly summarised everything here, so you can kind of see all the clefs and indeed how they kind of relate to each other on the right. So yes, there we are. If you need a sort of a ready reference, you could pause the video on this slide and use this to use this to refer to if you're working through some exercises. Right. Thank you very much for listening, and yeah, I hope that's helpful.